Welcome to Candid Conversations with Danitha and Katie, where we have conversations that help women in the accounting profession become their highest and best self. So today we're going to be talking all about fear, causes of fear, how you can face your fear, and how to finally let go of any fears you're currently holding on to. So I'd love to kick off this conversation by asking you, Danitha, what is a fear you've faced in your professional journey so far, and what's a fear you're currently working through?
Oh my goodness. I love this question. Well, early in my career, I would say that my fear was around being my true self and to be more concrete in that area. It was specifically around sharing what I intuitively knew about how money worked, but I didn't have research to back it up. So I knew that there was an emotional and psychological side to finances that I wanted to share and wanted to give advice on, but I couldn't at the time find enough research or information to support what I knew internally to be true. And so I had a lot of fear around expressing that. And I did work through it by starting to share it with girlfriends first, like a safe space. Like I shared it with my partner, now fiance, first, and then I would share it with friends. And then I started talking about it in larger groups, and then I started writing about it. So it was a process of overcoming that fear, but taking that first step of sharing my ideas with someone that I felt I could trust was my first step in overcoming that fear. Your second question, a fear that I'm currently working through. I am currently pursuing journalism as something that I want to create a full-time career out of. Full-time meaning like income wise, because I'll always have a million passions and want to do a lot of different things, but being considered a respected and full-time journalist is something that I'm really passionate about. And I've always been a writer. I wrote my first poem at the age of 6. I mean, it's something that I've been doing for as long as I know, but I've never given myself permission to explore it as a career. And that's bringing up a lot of fear because I'm not sure how to go about it. And also, there are a lot of messages around you can't make a full-time career out of being a journalist because publications aren't doing well financially. So how can you expect to be able to do this full time? And so there is a lot of fear there that I'm working through currently.
I love your honesty. I think that no matter where we're at in life, what stage, what journey, we all have fears. And as we work through them, it's great, but being aware that there's probably going to be new fears. And if we aren't experiencing fear, then we're probably not growing. So having some sort of fear is a good thing.
I laugh because that's so ironic and so annoying. It's like, can I grow without feeling this feeling? But no, I guess not. It's fine. What about you, Katie? What is a fear that you've worked through and overcome and one that you're currently working through?
Yeah, so I think my biggest fear I had was when I started my own business. What are others going to think of me? Are they going to think it's stupid? Am I going to share this and they're just going to be like, what is she doing? All the judgment of other people's opinions. And I was scared to get any sort of hate around it, which I don't even know why I was so scared of that, because if someone doesn't like approve of, what you're doing and the dreams you're chasing, like, why would I let their opinions deter me? And it's not like even at that time I'd even ever gotten any negativity around it. So I'd like made up this idea that people were going to make fun of me and just being really concerned what other people were going to say. And then I also kind of attached to that fear was really scared about sharing any sort of dreams I had for my business, because I thought that that might make people think that I was like self-absorbed. And it ties a lot into the guilt in our money video. We talked about like how like I had guilt around, like spending money. It seemed to come from a lot of the same place. So once I even started my business and like I had started, totally replaced my income, like doing well for myself, people would ask me about like, what do you do? And I would be like, oh, this little side business, and kind of like push it off to the side. So it was like, at first it was hard to share about it in terms of like what other people's opinions would be. And then it transformed kind of into wanting to play really small to not offend people and just really downplay it, almost like a compliment, where if someone's like, oh, you look nice today, it's like, oh, thank you. And you give it back another compliment. It's just like very downplayed what I was working on. A current fear that I'm facing is kind of similar to yours, where you mentioned being a journalist. I'm in a bit of a pivot in my business where I love doing the automation and consulting with firms one-on-one, but I'm also super passionate about helping them do their branding and their marketing, and trying to find a way to offer the automation advice on like a larger scale, and same with the branding, where I'm not sure if it's like coaching, because I kind of cringe a little bit at coaching. There's so many coaches, but at the same time, I'm very called to do that and to create a course and a community within that course. But I hear all the feedback that there's so many coaches, and my vision of what this could become is really big, but it's scary because right now I have, these other streams of income that are pretty consistent, and I know how to, continue to get revenue through them. So it's like managing a pivot and believing in yourself. It's never easy. It's something new.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it doesn't get, I feel like we get stronger, but it doesn't necessarily get easier each pivot that we go through. When did you realize, was there a catalyst for you where you realized, okay, I want to focus on branding, and perhaps this is through coaching and consulting? Like, what was that spark for you?
So I noticed I was starting to get pretty burnt out on some of these consultations that I was doing for like all the automation, and I still enjoy it, but I noticed burnt out is not necessarily the right word, but I noticed my feelings after those conversations compared to my feelings after some of these others, like talking about marketing and helping people with their content and their brand. I get energy from them. And
Same.
that's where I was like, wow, I walk away like tired from one thing and like bouncing off the walls from the other. There's got to be something here. And so now when I guess now when I start associating that other work with more like the burnout, because I notice I don't get energy from it.
Yes, that's the same marker for me too. Like me taking a moment to be aware of how do I feel after this task or after this activity. And yeah, same for me. Once I start feeling like I'm feeling drained after this, even if it's bringing in money, I'm like, oh gosh, now
Yeah,
this isn't going to work for much longer. I need to look at something else. Yes, I totally relate to that.
and I think it's important to bring up here. It's not to say that you don't ever have to do things you don't want to do. I'm sure you and I, like, we have to do things all the time that, they're not the most fun, but as a whole, you should be, doing things that give you energy.
Yes. Well, and that distinction, that's a beautiful distinction. And I think that distinction becomes clear the more self-aware activities and tasks you do. I mean, we do a lot of work, internal work on ourselves to know the difference between, I don't want to do the feeling of, I don't want to do my laundry versus this is actually draining my soul. I'll never say that doing laundry is something that I enjoy doing, but I'm aware enough to know that's not draining my soul either. But knowing yourself is the only way to be able to make that distinction.
Totally. What would you say are some tips that, those listening can use to face their fears? So they recognize that they're scared to do something and they want to do it, but how can they kind of move past that fear?
I think for me, what's worked is acknowledging the fear, not trying to push it under the rug or to shame myself for feeling that way. Really honoring that feeling, because I found that feeling is actually an indication that I'm moving in the right direction. So sounds weird, but I thank the fear for showing up, for giving me that sign that yes, this is the right path for you. And so I thank the fear. And then secondly, I start slowly sharing it. So I'll start with someone that's close and someone I feel I can feel safe with and that I can trust, that won't make me feel bad about this idea or make me feel stupid or like be like, what? Why are you doing that? I know that this person, usually it's my fiance, like 99.9% of the time, it's him first. He's so kind to like listen to all my ideas, but it's someone that I trust, that I share it with first, and then I slowly start to share it. And in sharing it helps embolden me because I start to get clearer on my message by sharing it. And then I also get ideas on how to make this thing happen from other people. So those are the first two steps that I take. I think the fear, usually that's through journaling, and then I'll start sharing it with people that are around me. And then it becomes clear in terms of the actual action steps to take
Hmm.
to make it happen.
I love those tips. I think that sharing it and having someone, that's supportive of it, of you and your ideas, like there's nothing worse than getting shot down. So having that person or those people you can go to is so important. For me, if I'm like really, really stuck on something, I maybe this is weird, but I'll sometimes like remove myself to the situation and pretend like I'm talking to a friend and they're telling me about these feelings. And it's whenever you answer them as a friend, like, why would you not try that? Like, what are you waiting for? It's like, what advice would you give to a friend? And sometimes I have to do that to myself. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what, like, why am I scared of this? Or, why, even if I am scared of this, like, why would I let that stop me? And so kind of like removing myself from the situation is what I have to do at times.
I love that. And it reminds me too, I love how you phrased it in terms of removing yourself from the situation. Sometimes, like, I think that that's a great example, especially if you don't feel like you have someone close that you can share it with. Because I know there was a period of time where I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could share ideas with. So if you can get to a space where you can see yourself as a friend and give yourself advice in that way, that can be really helpful. And if you're someone that's like really in your body, sometimes for me, I have to go to the gym, like completely
Mm.
remove myself from anything that's cerebral. I have to get from behind the computer and just go work out, and then magically these ideas will come.
Oh, I love that. Movement is like my best ideas come to me whenever I'm on a walk, working out, like anything that like gets me moving. That's like, okay, just like if I'm like really stuck in the middle of the day, it's like go for a walk. And I feel like action is the only cure to actually fear. So like if I feel stuck, it's like go for a walk and then come back
Mhm.
and just try something. Because you're sitting there like in your fear, like seated, nothing's moving. So go for a walk, go for a run, go to yoga, like you said, like get moving and then just try something.
That is so true. Clarity comes from action, not thought. That's something that Marie Forleo says all the time, and it's so true. You got to get moving, whatever it is. It could be through your body, it could be actually taking steps on the idea, but you have to get moving.
Yes. What would you say are some tips for, a lot of times I feel like whenever we get stuck in fear, we start to judge ourselves for not having the right answer and, feeling these feelings of fear. What are some tips you would give to deal with these feelings of judgment and not, you feel stuck?
Yeah, for sure. I practice a lot of self compassion. I used to be incredibly critical of myself, which I don't shame myself for that because that's part of being ambitious and that's part of having drive and part of always wanting to achieve the next thing. So I'm not mad at myself for being critical of myself. However, I've learned to balance that with a lot of self compassion. So for me, that looks like sometimes if I feel incredibly stuck, I'll write out all the things that I love about myself and I'll read it to myself in the mirror. I have a binder that I keep mantras in. And every morning I open up that binder and read mantras to myself. And those mantras are usually are some of the mantras are things that support self-love and reminds me that I'm deserving and worthy. And so that helps me move out of feeling stuck and judging myself for not knowing the right answer. And then the second thing that I do is I keep an email folder of, I call it praise. And these are all messages that I've received from various people, whether it's past clients, current clients, or people that are on my newsletter, like thanking me for stuff. And sometimes I'll read through those to remind myself, oh, yes, there are people that like me out in the world. And it helps me feel, it may not give me the answers that I need right away, but it helps loosen up that feeling of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not, because I can go down a rabbit hole
Hmm.
of like, well, you don't know what you're doing. Well, you never knew what you were doing. And what makes you think that you're going to be able to achieve this? You can't even figure out this next step. Like, it's just a terrible, toxic rabbit hole. So that helps get me out of that rabbit hole and hopefully in a space where I can start making decisions.
Oh, I love that. I can totally relate to going down the rabbit hole. Something else I've noticed to be helpful whenever I, start to feel these feelings, and I can definitely get frustrated with myself and be like, you should be farther along by now. You should be clear. Like, you had these feelings, X amount of months ago. Like, you should have, like, addressed them then. It's almost like it's too late to address them. It's crazy thoughts. And it's like something, if I'm really like getting stuck, it's like, okay, you're feeling these feelings for a reason. Why are you feeling them? What action can you take? And what can you learn from these feelings? So sometimes it's like just accepting that it's like part of your journey to work through these things and address them. And, like that's part of you. And so that goes back to sometimes I share things online with others when I'm going through them because it helps me and hopefully helps them. I know I shared, this was back last winter, a video where I was like, I had a really bad month in sales. Like, it was just not what I had planned on, expected, and I shared all of it. I just put it out there. And I was like, you know what? Sometimes entrepreneurship, a lot of times it's a highlight reel, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And so I felt like, when I was feeling these feelings of fear, like, wow, the business had been going great, and then I had a really off month, and I started to like really question myself. Just sitting in that, like those feelings and being like, what can I learn from this? Or what can I help others learn from this? And for me, it was like, that things happen and you can't always plan for the future. And sometimes you got to pivot and adjust. But if I can share my experiences with others, I like found meanings in those feelings, if that made any sense.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And I can also see that helping bring clarity to the situation too by sharing what, like, it helps process the
Yes.
feelings that you have. And so it doesn't, so you're able to move forward because those feelings are part of the reason why we feel stuck because we can't make sense of them.
Yes. Yes. And I don't know if you are like this, being a boss on your awakening your feminine power. We talked about how you had the feminine type as being the boss, but
As did you.
yeah, exactly. It's like you want to be in control of things,
Oh, yes.
aren't, or you don't have that perfect vision for the path forward, which we all know is crazy because it never goes as planned, which is beautiful. It's really hard to let go of that control.
Oh my gosh, that is something that I'm continuously working on. And honestly, we are both in alignment or like-minded in terms of movement is really important to us. That feeling of needing to be in control, I have found the best way for me to work through that is through dance. Like, I can't think my way out of that. I can't talk my way into thinking differently. Like, I just have to go dance it out. And that has been my way of releasing that feel. Because being in control is also a positive attribute, right? Because
Mhm.
that's what helps us become bosses and maintain being a boss. It's also something that can really create a lot of stress and anxiety as well. So the only way I'm able to work through that is by going to a dance class or
Oh,
dancing in my living room.
I love that. For me, it's always been horseback riding. So it's you're
Oh,
in control more than me.
oh, I love that.
That is like the only thing I do where I feel like I fully forget all these like crazy thoughts going on in my head. So having like dance or riding horses or whatever, where you're just like free and you work through all that movement, I think is so important for anyone to find that thing. And it, it could even be reading or writing or yoga. Like everyone, I think, has a hobby that allows them to get there. So burying yourself in work's not healthy to deal with it. And I think that, I know I've tried to do that before. You can't.
Can't. It's not sustainable. It'll work. It's interesting because it'll work for a period of time, but the more self-aware we become, I know for me, the more self-aware I become, like I'm really tuned into, okay, this seems like it's working on the outside, but I know this will not sustain itself.
The Band-Aid.
Yes.
The Band-Aid.
The Band-Aid, yes. That's so true. When there's this gaping hole that needs to be healed.
So would you say that, as like you work through fears over time, does it get easier each time you tackle a fear, or sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier? What's that like for you?
For me, I found it gets easier in the sense of now I have tools. Like working through this current fear of mine, becoming a full-time journalist, I have tools that I have names that I can put to it that I'm pulling out of my chest. Like one of the tools, I call it in case you forgot. Like in case you forgot, Denitha, you've already done this before. In case you forgot, you used to you've coached writers on how to build their careers, and they are doing it full time. Like in case you forgot, like you figured out how to make something out of nothing before. And so I get into that. I'll pull out that tool when I need to take on this like sassy, confident feeling, and that'll get me into a mind state of, yes, you can make this happen, yes, you can do this. And it's that, having that tool, for instance, there's lots of tools, but having that tool, knowing I have that tool, having a name to put to it, makes this journey much easier than in previous times where I was going through a pivot, but I didn't have those tools, I didn't have those experiences. That's not to say that it's easy, but I feel like I have I'm much more calm going through this pivot than previous transitions.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think, if for people listening, if they don't have prior experiences to leverage or feel like, maybe they're doing a pivot that doesn't relate to anything they've done previously, I would just like to say, first off, you've done a lot of hard things before you've done them. I'm sure you've done them well. But secondly, if you can find other people that have done what you've done and, utilize their toolkits, read their biographies, listen to their podcasts, a lot of times that, at least for me, helps me say, okay, I can do this too. So look to others, look inside yourself. That's really the key with dealing with fear. It's there for everyone, but once you acknowledge it and take action, that's the cure.
Yes. And I loved all those points. I really loved your point though, Katie, about you may not have done this exact thing before, but you've gone through challenging times that at the time you probably thought you couldn't get through, and you did. So that's like even in my situation, like I've never done this before, but there are things that I've done that I can point to where I've had to dig deep and get through it. So that for someone else, maybe you're just starting your career journey. Maybe it's your first job, let's say out of school. Well, you applied to college, you went through that interview process, you got into the school, you graduated. Like all of those things maybe seem insignificant, but they were times where you had to face your fear and you got through it and you accomplished it. And this is just another fear similar to that.
Yes, completely. It's at any time something's new, it seems so scary. And like even down to, I remember the first day of first grade, I was so nervous, and then over time that got easy. And then, maybe like driving a car, it's nerve-wracking, or going on your first date. It's like all those things seem so scary. You just have to do them, and then the next thing will be scary. And I think it's so funny thinking back on sometimes I was stressed out about like, I was fearful of doing something, and now it's easy to think it's funny and like almost like ridiculous that I was scared. But that's like these current fears that I'm dealing with, and I'm sure people listening, a couple years down the road or maybe even a few months, you'll look back and be like, why was I even scared? I just had to do it.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. All of that.
Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about for fear?
Oh, I think maybe the last point, especially if we're talking about judgment,
Judgment.
self-judgment, I try to practice. I'm certainly not perfect at this, but I feel, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Katie, like the more I practice not judging others, the less I judge myself. So maybe if it's hard to get to a place where you don't judge yourself, just focus on practicing on non-judgment of others, and that may open up a portal for you.
Oh, yes. I can relate to this because I read a book once, and I'll have to link it down below because I'm blanking on what it was called. But they talked about how what you see in others is what you see inside of yourself. And so through realizing that and like seeing that if I'm placing judgment on other people for like their actions they're taking, then somehow I'm tying that to something within myself. And I noticed when I released that and just focused on like not judging others, like everyone's on their own path, own journey, and just giving them love because that's all I can give them, that a lot of the judgment I was placing upon myself and the expectations I placed upon myself, I was able to release them.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Please remember the name of that book because I'd love to read it.
Yeah, I'll let you know so that we can put it in the comments. It's one of my favorite books. So that's terrible. I don't know why I can't think of it, but I'm not going to judge myself right now. As soon as I do that, it'll never come.
There you go. See, we are works in progress. We are walking our talk.
Yes. Well,
I love that.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in to Candid Conversations with Danitha and Katie. We do want to leave you with a final question. What is a fear that you faced in your professional career that you've overcome? You can comment down below. We're looking forward to reading your answers, engaging with you, and staying in touch with you all. So thank you again so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you.